on, welcome everybody. I say everybody, vast multitude, throngs of people sitting at pianos with one finger ready to go. Number 6, this is episode number 6 of the One Finger at a Time piano lesson. And let's get straight to it. Please send in any questions if you have them. And the idea here is to give some easy piano lessons to people who are just starting. And some people who are really just starting, never played before, and there'll be others who have played. And so I'm trying to pitch it really somewhere in the middle, so it's not too slow to be boring for those who already have some knowledge, and not too advanced to be hard to grasp for people who are completely new to this. It's a bit like speaking a new language. So it's counterintuitive in some respects to begin with. If you're enjoying it, there's a link to click and donate, and there's also a thing on there, more importantly, to subscribe to the little newsletter thing, which doesn't cost anything. And while I'm locked here in the studios for the duration, I'll be churning out some music and might send some your way if you're up for it. Anyway, we started out with one finger, just to recap briefly, going like this. And then we made that into a chord. And we talked about how this note is C, and how the chord is called C, or more, to give it its full name, C major. And we talked about the difference between C major and C minor, which has melancholy qualities.
Move your mic back a little bit. Just a little bit.
If everyone can see that. And then we get two examples, a Fats Domino and a Professor Longhair tune in one of the early lessons, which you can find on the Facebook page if you scroll back. And you can play along to I Hear You Knocking and Every Day and Every Night. And I picked those two tunes because they're in C. And so if you put them on, if your piano's pretty much in tune, you should be able to play along, turn it up to get it to the right volume, and then play along. And last week we talked about the importance of training your ear to know when to change from one chord to the next in the course of a song. That's called the chord progression. And the examples I gave you were in C, because C is a very easy key to play in. If you play, this is the note of C, this is the chord of C, and then when you play a song like I Hear You Knocking, you went away and left me long time ago. I hear you come back knocking on my door. I hear you knocking, baby, but you can't come in. I hear you knocking, go back where you've been. I told you way back in 53, your kind of loving's no good for me. I hear you knocking, baby, but you can't come in. I hear you knocking, go back where you've been. That's a song in the key of C. When you play a blues in the key of C, there are usually three main chords. In this instance, in the key of C, there's C and F and G. And when you're playing in the key of C, it's easy because they all have the same shape. Your fingers, relative to each other, don't move, but your whole hand goes up from C to F to G. And you can go up the whole scale like this, and it sounds pleasing. But C is just one of several keys, and even though it's a good key to start learning the piano in, you'll find that there are good keys for playing the guitar in, and there are good keys for playing saxophones in. And so in the grand big pantheon of musical endeavor, people have employed all the keys. And today we're going to look at playing something in a different key, B flat, which sounds a bit scary. But it really is a very important key for New Orleans music, because New Orleans recorded music was largely dictated by the keys that suited horns, saxophones and trumpets and trombones. And in the early New Orleans pop groups were bands that played out in the street a lot, or played indoors too, but the weather's nice here in New Orleans, so you have a lot of, there's always been a tradition of street music, and it's much easier to march with a trumpet than it is to march with a piano. Trumpets and clarinets and saxophones, they were the electric guitars of the day. That was the sound that drove the teenagers crazy. And so, consequently, piano players who accompanied them would play in their keys. And they weren't bad keys to play in the piano. We're going to look at one of them right now, which is called B flat. And if you remember, you've got a pen and a pencil. It's kind of handy if you're starting out to write down what these are. C, D, E, F, G, A, B, and then back to C. And hit C to C, to C to C. The piano is only that long. Everything else is just repeating it. So if you're daunted by 88 keys, don't be. Just look at this distance from C to C, one octave higher. So a lot of what I try to do in this thing, I think, because I taught myself how to play and went down this similar route, is give you some constructive sort of theoretical premises, but at the same time make it fun and keep an eye on actually playing tunes, but stretch you out a little bit. And in the course of half an hour there's only so much you can touch on, but the idea here is that you do these, pay attention, watch it again, and then go back to the earlier lessons, and then you can rewind and play and go over and over certain bits if you're not sure, or if I haven't done a good enough job of explaining. And if you do have questions, you can always send in messages, C major is there. It's also here. It's also here, and here, and here, and here, and here. But it sounds good right in the middle here. C major, we talked about earlier on, comprises of 3 notes. It's called a triad because of that. And those notes can be organized in 3 different ways, 3 different inversions. Here's a very basic first shape for C, but if you wanted to, you could play the C on top instead of here at the bottom of the chord, in which case it would look like that. And so it sounds a bit different. It has a slightly different personality, and then you can do the same thing again by putting this note on top and playing it at the top of the chord instead of at the bottom of the chord. So practice that and getting used to the idea that these are shapes. And once you've done that for F, do it for C, do it for F. And then do it for G. At first it's going to be difficult to wrap your head around. After a while of doing it, it's as easy as riding a bicycle. But you're going to have to fall off a couple of times until you get it. So if that's C, then a logical step is to say, well, if that sounds in tune, C, if you were to take each one of these notes but play them one note lower, one note at a time, so you just do it one finger at a time. So this is the note, make that note one lower, make this one lower, and make this one lower, and now listen to what it sounds like. That sounds in tune. That's because that's called B major. We started with C major, and then slow process, just one finger at a time, changing the note for the one immediately below it. And now you have B major, and logic says, well, if you can do that and get to B major, then if you do it again and drop that note one finger at a time, this one and then this one here, that's called B flat major. It's because there's a note in between B and A. Here's A and B, and there's a note in between. So if you drop a note, you make it flat. If you raise a note, you make it sharp. This chord here has two names, depending on the context, and you don't need to worry about this, you get into this much later on, but just so you understand that this is C, and you look, go down one, it's a white note, that's B. If you go down one more, that's B flat. One more, that's A. So in the crack between A and B is a note that can be called B flat, or it can also be called A sharp. But most people call it B flat in the R&B world. So C, drop each note by one, and you get B, and you're just basically going down through the alphabet. The next one is B flat. If you keep going, this is a good practice, painstaking, but one note at a time. Now you got A major, and if you keep going down, there's A flat major, there's G major, there's F sharp major, there's F major. We already know that one from Lean on Me and the Fats Domino tunes. Go down one more, that's E major, that's E flat major, that's D major, that's D flat major, or you could call it C sharp major. Once again, it's got two names depending on the context. And then go down one more and you're back at C. Those are all the major chords. That's all the major chords there are. You can do it this way and go up. Practice this just because it starts to get your fingers familiar with the keyboard and increases your overall understanding of the, it's like getting, up until now we've been playing in a tiny corner of the football field. This gives you big giant strides all around the field so you get to know the parameters that you're working within. So start with C, do the same thing, take your thumb and put it up one note to the black note, take this finger, put that up one note and this one up one note. Might have to do it slowly at first. And that's C sharp. We started with C, and you go up, and you get C sharp. If you're playing it and it sounds like that, or then use your ears to tell you that you're not doing it right. Start relying on your ears and listen to see whether or not, in your opinion, it sounds right or not. There's no such thing as a wrong chord, but it might be wrong in the context. In this context, we're learning all the major chords by doing painstakingly going up one note at a time. By itself, it doesn't sound very musical. It's a bit like conjugating a verb instead of using one actually in the sentence when you're chatting to somebody. But you still benefit from just starting to get used to these different shapes. So, we're going to play a Lordy Miss Claudie by Lloyd Price. Original version was from 1952? Early, I think. Maybe later than maybe 55, 56, I'm not sure, it doesn't matter. Fats Domino played piano on the session. And it's a very typical Fats Domino sound, a sound that's associated with Fats, but it was one that was actually the ethnic folk music of the time in the city of New Orleans. And there's a sound very much associated with New Orleans. Musicians call it 12/8 triplets. That's the technical name for it. And we looked at it a little bit in the Fats domino tune and the Professor Longhair song in C, I Hear You Knocking, and Every Day and Every Night. And that was about the third lesson, I think. Right now, we're going to employ the same rhythmic pattern, but we're going to do it in B flat, which is the same key that they recorded it in. And so that's why we're doing this. So you can play on YouTube, you can go Lloyd Price, Lordy Miss Claudie, and you can start practicing playing along with it and trying to keep up. And so to play this song, you're going to need to know 3 chords. And these chords are going to be unfamiliar to beginners, and they use a lot of black notes. So we're starting to get closer to the deep end, a little dipping your toes in the deep end. So in the key of B flat, the 3 chords you need to know are B flat, major. We just learned how to find that out. We know where C is. You go down one more. There's B flat. So just start by playing B flat. Play it really as soft as you can play it. And then as loud as you can play it. And then we're going to be operating, if the softest is 1 and the loudest is 10, we want to be at around comfortable 5. Play B flat. Now play a B flat with your thumb. Here's C, remember? Down 1 is B, 1 more is B flat. And that's a bass note to make the chord sound nice and big. And to make it sound even bigger, stretch your hand and put your pinky, your little finger, down on the next B flat on the keyboard, an octave lower. And there it is. You play them together. It sounds nice and strong. If you feel very bold, take the whole hand an octave lower, and you can play one of the lowest notes on the keyboard. And that sounds really good. Some electric keyboards won't stretch down that far, but pianos usually have 88 notes, and so. Now, play the chord and just let it ring and just listen to it. Like I say, go for about 5 or 6. On a scale of 1 to 10 of how hard to hit. And it's very pleasing on the piano, largely because you're utilizing this nice long, low bass note. But it doesn't have to be all the way there. If you've got a shorter keyboard, you can play with up here, or you can just play it with your thumb, or just your little finger. Now, take your hands off, and now put them back on again and try and remember where they go. And if you can't remember, go back to basics. Start with C, play C major, and do what we did at the beginning of the lesson, which is go down by 1 note here, 1 note here, 1 note here on this finger, and play B until it makes sure it sounds right. And then do the same thing. Go down 1 more, and now that's B flat. So look at it, try and remember what it looks like. That's called a shape. When you look at the notes you're playing, after a while, you tend to employ a part of your brain that thinks in abstract terms and thinks of that as a shape. And you'll find that these shapes repeat themselves in other places. Anyway, that's for later on. Play the B flat, play a B flat with your thumb beneath it, and then an octave below that to get the big B flat chord, and then just let it ring and listen to it. All right. Now, try doing that 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. These are called triplets. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. And when you play them, try and put some feeling into it. Go 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, so 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, like a robot. much character, but if you go, that's B flat. The next chord is E flat. So use your powers of logic and reasoning to find E flat. Remember where C is? Well, first we'll find out where E is. So there's C, where we've started with one finger at the very first lesson. C, D, E. Okay. And one down is E flat. So that's the note of E flat. We know that these triads is called start with that note. This is what E flat looks like. You can find it by a process of scientific and logical thinking. Here's C. One up, that's C sharp. One up, that's D. One up, that's D sharp or E flat. You're learning the three basic tools for this song. So you've got B flat, E flat, and then F. Well, we already know F. C, D, E, F. That's F major. So B flat, practice these, E flat and F, and then try playing them again. Try going from one to the other and memorizing where they land. It's going to take you quite a long time if you're just starting. Don't be put off, and don't be afraid to use a pencil to make notes on the keyboard if you need to, if that helps you speed it up, and then play the chords again, but with the notes in the bass. Those are the three tools you're going to use. So I'm going to play you the song. Well now, Lordy, 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 Miss Claudie, well you sure look good to me. Well now, please don't excite me, baby. Yeah, you know it can't be me. 'Cause you taking B flat all my money. Here's the chord change coming up, E flat. But you just don't treat me right. B flat chord change. Ball every morning, quick chord change to F. Then I'll treat me right. B flat. Chord change to F. Tell your mama, well now E flat, how you doing for me? Well B flat, tell everybody F. They're in misery, B flat. Now if you wanted, you could take a piece of paper and just count the number of bars. If it's going 1, 2, 3, 4. So the number of bars on B flat, I'm going to count it out to you. And as you will see, this is an 8-bar blues. 1, 2, 3, 4. 2, 2, 3, 4. 3, 2, 3, 4. 2, 3, 4. 5, 2, 3, 4. 6, 2, 3, 4. 7, 2, 3, 4. 8, 2, 3, 4. And then back to 1. So that's 8 bars. Each bar consists of 1, 2, 3, 4. 2, 2, 3, 4. 3, 2, 3. So if you want, you can take a pen and a piece of paper and just write how many bars you stay on each tune. Just listen to it and you can tell when You can hear when it changes chord. This is all logic. If that's B flat, then if you play the B flat on the top of the chord instead of the bottom of the chord, it puts it here. That's B flat. That's the first inversion of B flat. We did inversions about 3 lessons ago looking at C. The same principle applies here. Now take this and put this at the top. So now this is another way of playing B flat, and in this instance, in my opinion, it's better. The left hand is something that's going to come later on, but the left hand is going. That's a separate thing to practice, and this will take, you can spend weeks just doing it and do it really slowly, and it's a bit like that thing of, you know, patting your head and rubbing your stomach. Or patting your stomach and rubbing your head. Or doing it the other way around, rubbing it. You have to develop a little bit of independent movement with your hands because you're doing lots of different stuff. So this is how I would play Lordy Miss Claudy. I would play it in this inversion here. And inversions can be chosen for every chord in your chord progression. So you have a lot of stuff to learn, but some inversions sound better, and that's where you get good as a piano player in choosing. It's your taste. It makes you separate from the other piano players, which inversion of the chord and which phrasing of the chord, and which spices to add to the chord. And I think if you play this song, and in B flat, there's B flat, there's the first inversion, there's the second inversion. Your thumb, in this instance, can be used to play not just that note, but the one next to it. By itself, it doesn't sound very musical, but you add that to the chord, and now you've got this extra little chord. And when you go to the second chord in the song, here's another variety, an inversion. And this is important because in this instance, to go from B flat to E flat 7, all you need to do is change one finger, and it sounds like this. Well, I say, Lordy, 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 Miss Claudy, yeah, you sure look good to me. Major leap forward in playing R&B and New Orleans blues. And it's ostensibly a simple, logical process, even though to the beginner it's, but first, a lot to take on board. But that's why you have to keep doing it and practicing it. When I was a little kid, I would spend hours just experimenting and going over it and over it once again. So anyway, we've come to the half an hour mark.
Do you want to take another? There's a few questions that came in. You want to
Yeah.
go another 5 minutes and answer some
Sure,
questions?
sure.
Okay. So there's about 4 of them. So
Okay.
Rafael Santos says when you're playing
Hey, Raphael.
when you're playing this, he's from YouTube. When you're playing the C chord, you're using your thumb. Is that the correct shape, or can I use 3 different fingers if that's more comfortable to me?
There's no rules in any of this stuff. And I think the first thing is to play what's most comfortable. That will get you in some bad habits, which can trip you up later on. Because there are sometimes advantages to using certain fingers to play a chord if they free up other fingers that can then do more interesting additional things later on when you get a bit better. But I wouldn't worry about that too much at the beginning. I taught myself how to play, and so I've got into all sorts of bad habits, but they actually are bad habits that sound right, and they are limiting to me now. And in fact, like there's a lot of lots of styles of music where I'd have to go back and unlearn these things, but I don't particularly want to play those styles of music anyway. I play New Orleans R&B, so it doesn't bother me. But yeah, play what's comfortable to start with, and then if at a point you find you need to change the fingering in order to do something, then that's the next step in learning how to play.
And then our friend Ann Byrne up in New York says, I had a hard time with slurring.
Drink more. It's always worked for me. All right. By slurring, I think what you mean is this thing we talked about in a previous lesson, where a trick in playing blues, and one thing that makes blues and not something else, and why we dig it so much and why it's so exciting and so sexy, is because you're employing a trick. And we'll play C major, there's C major there, and now we play C minor, which is a chord that is imbued with a quality that suggests to our minds sadness, melancholy, solitude, pensiveness, a philosophical mood, and we still have no idea why, but it's universally acknowledged. For some reason, that's more plaintive than that. And the laws of music simply say you have one or you have the other, but you can't have both, because if you have both, it sounds like this. And even people who are tone deaf and not musical will, if you play, so does this sound in tune or out of tune? They'll say, that sounds horrible. It's like fingers on a blackboard. But really, those are the tools that's what you're playing with. You dip your toes in this and use it at your peril. But without doing it and doing it right, you're never going to be playing the blues. And so what the blues players do is they play one and very quickly slide this finger onto the next note and make it this. You can't really play both of them at the same time, generally speaking. There are instances when you can. Like I say, it sounds painful if you do that. But if you do this, you've taken something, it goes by, it's like a, you know those, there's an episode of of Columbo.
Your favorite.
Early on, when they would, it illustrates how when you went to the movies, subliminal information, they would insert one frame of a very frosty, very appealing looking bottle of Coca-Cola that would, as the film flew past over the light of the projector, they're just a sequence of stills which create the illusion of a moving image. They'd insert these little things, and your brain does see it, but it sees it so fleetingly that it doesn't know that it's seen it. Just you suddenly think, oh, a nice cold Coca-Cola, that would be nice. Well, you're kind of doing the same thing here when you play. That first chord is the sad one, but you're resolving it. You're like giving the sad story a happy ending by not dwelling on it for very long. In fact, for a split second. But that's how you get that. That riff. So that's slurring. And how you employ it is something that's going to keep you busy for years if you so choose. And that's what ultimately gives you your sound, how you use those tools.
Okay, 2 more questions. Patty Sue says, can you show us the left hand one more time slowly? I'm ready to put it all together.
Okay. Well, I'll show it to you in C first of all, and then we'll transpose it to B flat, which is for the song we've been looking at today. So the right hand is going, playing triplets. The rhythmic pattern is a triplet. The actual chord itself is comprised of 3 notes, and that's called a triad. There's a difference between a triplet and a triad. In your left hand, in this instance in C, there's the basic New Orleans R&B piano. Left hand goes. And the notes that you're playing are basically the same. It's a C chord, except we're stretching out and including a C on the top as well as at the bottom. You don't play it as a chord. You break it up into its constituent notes and play a phrase. Using your little finger, your thumb, this finger, that finger. So you play it over and over again so you get to find out where the notes are. And then as you get a bit more comfortable with it, and it's only by repetition that you can start doing this automatically without having to think about every single note. Because when I play, I don't think about every single note. It's because I've done this so many millions of times that these shapes become second nature and your fingers know where to go. But when you're starting, you've got to think about each note, one finger at a time. And then at a point where you can get a handle on it and then marry the two things up. And do it really slowly at first. And really slow if necessary. Until you can get to. That's C. Same thing for F. Same thing for G. Practice those and you'll be able to play most New Orleans R&B, Fats Domino kind of tunes. This time I'm walking to New Orleans. C. The F. Walking to New Orleans. And I'm gonna need 2 pair of shoes when I get through walking these blues. I'm gonna walk into New Orleans. You can play along with the Fats Domino records, but quite often you'll find when you play this, you'll think, hang on, he sounds different. He's playing in a different key. And that's why at the beginning of this lesson we started looking at B flat. And I urge you to go back and play the whole lesson over again, because if you play it in B flat, it's. If you remember, I said I like to play, instead of playing this B flat, I like to play this B flat. Add this note. And then when I go to the E flat, this is an example of what you can do if you start thinking of the different ways of playing E flat. This instance, I'm just dropping this note. This is kind of a complicated move. We could develop a whole program, but just listen to the way this sounds. Here's B flat. Here's E flat. That's really sexy, and it's got all the spice in there. That's telling much more of a story than if you were to just use the first inversions all the time and go. And that's good, nothing wrong with it, but this is better. And then we're going to get more into that. It's more complicated, but I just wanted to give you all a little taste of it. So, B flat, E flat, F, the three chords that make up the key of B flat when you're playing the blues, and the corresponding bass line when you play the notes in the bass. And if you want to get real jiggy with it, go like this. The slur, that thing of subliminal message, which is like putting a little bit of hot sauce in there, making it sexy. That's the end of today's One Finger at a Time lesson. Thank you very much. Remember, if you go to the link, click on the subscribe thing, and I'm going to start sending you all some. The beauty of this whole thing is I'm going to be able to send you stuff that I wouldn't usually release, but that might give you pleasure if you like New Orleans piano. Sometimes stuff just done on my cell phone upstairs on the piano. All right, thank you. Tuesday, tune in at 8 o'clock in the evening, New Orleans time, because we're going to do a quarantine hour, and the proceeds of which, the generous donations of which, are going to go to the good people at Offbeat magazine, which is the main New Orleans music magazine, which is, of course, fighting for survival in these strange times, but it's important. It's a great service in disseminating news and information about the New Orleans musicians, the gigs, the history, and it's a great thing, fantastic thing. So I'm doing my little bit to help that, give that some oxygen. So please tune in 8 o'clock on Tuesday. See you then. Thank you.